The case background and main character. Let me set the stage. In the summer of 2006, Collegetown, Illinois was at its liveliest. Nestled in the American Midwest, this city is defined by its blend of youthful student life and a tight-knit local community. Collegetown is home to two major universities, the world-renowned Illinois State University and the respected Central Illinois University. The streets are always vibrant with students lugging textbooks, coffee shops that never seem to sleep, and the comforting clamor of American college tradition. Football nights, charity fairs, and weekends flooded with music and laughter. It was in this nurturing yet bustling environment that Emily Dawson found herself forging her path toward adulthood. Emily wasn't just another face among the thousands of students. She was a 24-year-old senior at Illinois State University, majoring in veterinary medicine. And, to everyone who knew her, she wasn't simply book smart. Emily was an only child raised in a small rural town in northern Illinois, where she spent her childhood saving stray animals. Her compassion and grit were legendary. She had once nursed a barn owl back to health after finding it injured by the roadside. Standing at 5'7" with brown hair always tied in a ponytail and bright, eager eyes, Emily was the kind of person who drew others in. Professors admired her diligence, and classmates often turned to her for tutoring or advice. She worked part-time at a local animal shelter and was known to volunteer her weekends at free clinics for working families. Above all, she dreamed, sometimes aloud, of opening her own veterinary practice so she could offer affordable care to pets in underserved communities. Emily was also fiercely independent, having moved away from her parents to live in a modest off-campus apartment downtown. She cycled everywhere, was rarely seen without her beloved beagle mix named Milo, and kept a meticulously organized daily planner. Her friends described her as cheerful but private. She loved hiking trips and late-night study marathons but rarely confided her deepest struggles. For all her approachability, Emily's inner world was a guarded place. In her final year, Emily balanced her challenging veterinary classes with intensive, practical rotations at the college's animal hospital. Her resilience was being tested by demanding professors, competitive classmates, mounting loan debt, and the pressure to secure an internship after graduation. By early June, with the final exams behind her, Emily was on the cusp of transformation, a new chapter seemingly about to begin. But sometimes the future isn't what anyone expects. On the eve of what should have been a happy turning point, a single night would forever alter Emily's trajectory and leave Collegetown haunted by questions that, even 2 decades later, have never truly faded. The fateful end-of-term party. On the evening of June 5, 2006, the town of Collegetown was buzzing with the unique energy that only comes at the end of a long academic year. Finals had been conquered, relief and anticipation hung in the warm summer air, and students from all corners of Illinois State University converged to celebrate a brief pocket of freedom before real life arrived to sweep them into adulthood. That Monday night, a cozy but lively bar called the Blue Lantern, just 2 blocks from campus, played host to the Department of Veterinary Medicine's end-of-term gathering. The occasion was extra jubilant for 2 reasons. Not only did it mark the end of grueling exams for seniors and underclassmen alike, but the next day was Memorial Day, a federal holiday. Classes would pause, and nobody had to worry about getting up early with a hangover. Emily Dawson, the focus of our story, almost skipped the event. After weeks of late-night studying and hands-on clinical rotations at the university's animal hospital, her exhaustion was palpable. But friends had insisted she come. The last party before everyone scattered for internships or went home for the summer. Emily finally relented, bringing along her signature spiral-bound planner so she could watch the clock and promise herself an early night. The bar quickly filled with over 40 students and a handful of professors, transforming the usually mellow space into a patchwork of laughter and overlapping conversations. Emily drifted through pockets of classmates. Some she'd sat beside in microbiology, others she'd traded shifts with at the animal shelter. Drinks flowed freely. The university's unofficial a cappella group even treated everyone to a spontaneous rendition of a classic rock hit. There was an unspoken bond in the room, a sense that they'd conquered something big together, united by sweat, caffeine, and the relentless pressure of veterinary school. Emily, typically reserved in social situations, found herself unusually at ease. Her best friend Mark, a fellow senior known for his wry humor and steadfast loyalty, stuck close by her side, refilling her ginger ale and swapping stories about their most memorable cases from the animal hospital. Professors, less formal away from the lecture halls, mingled easily with students, offering advice about the working world and raising a toast to future successes. For a brief while, worries melted away, replaced by the comfort of community and hope for the future. The night pressed on, and as the clock neared 2:30 a.m., the crowd slowly began to thin. Friends embraced, promising to keep in touch, and gathering in loose clusters on the sidewalk outside. Emily checked her planner, debating whether she should stay for just one more song, but ultimately decided to call it a night. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, thanked her professors for a wonderful evening, and slipped on her backpack, the same one she took everywhere, filled with medical notes and dog treats for Milo. Unbeknownst to everyone there, this gathering, so ordinary in every way, so full of laughter and optimism, would be the last time Emily Dawson was seen in the company of her peers. Within hours, the buoyant energy of celebration would give way to unanswered questions, frantic searches, and haunting uncertainty. The end-of-term party that should have marked a joyful milestone instead became the pivot point for one of the most perplexing disappearances in College Town's history. The final moments at the party. As the clock crept toward 2:30 a.m., the energy at the Blue Lantern began to wane, shifting from the raucous laughter and lively chatter of celebration to something softer and more subdued. The crowds had thinned, leaving behind only the die-hard partiers and a few close-knit circles lost in quieter conversation. Tables stood littered with half-empty glasses, the remnants of fried appetizers and scattered napkins scribbled with inside jokes. Emily Dawson, always mindful of time and responsibilities, glanced at her watch and gathered her things. She tucked her signature spiral-bound planner into her well-worn backpack, mentally ticking off her final checklist of the night. Despite her exhaustion, she paused by the bar to thank the owner for accommodating their group so late, flashing her polite, slightly weary smile. Her friends, winding down after the hours of revelry, clustered around her. Mark, her loyal confidant, Jessica, her roommate, and a few more from the animal shelter crew. There was a gentle reluctance to say goodbye. Someone snapped a few last pictures, hoping to immortalize the relief and togetherness after a taxing semester. Mark offered to walk Emily home, concern etched on his face, as was often the case whenever Emily prepared to head out alone at night. "It's late," he said, voice low, trying to sound casual. "You sure you're okay walking back by yourself?" Emily, always independent, managed a small laugh and waved him off, but relented when her friends chimed in, wanting everyone to be safe. The group made their way to the sidewalk under flickering streetlights. The buzz of the party faded behind them, replaced by the hum of a quiet town simmering in the early hours. Emily lingered for a moment, exchanging hugs and promises with Jessica to meet for breakfast. She and Mark then separated from the rest, letting the group's laughter recede into the warm night. As they walked, Emily spoke softly about her plans for the future, her voice barely above a whisper, her hope of opening that clinic, her fears about student debt, her gratitude for having such steadfast friends. Mark mostly listened, occasionally chiming in with encouragement and the kind of dry humor only she seemed to appreciate. At the corner where they would part ways, Emily stopped. The street was empty, bathed in the amber glow of a nearby lamp. She squeezed Mark's hand and told him, "I'll be fine, really." He hesitated before letting her go, standing on the sidewalk as she walked the last block toward her apartment. Mark watched her until the lights from her window flickered on, and only then did he turn and head home himself, his steps slow and pensive. He would later recall that last moment, Emily glancing back with a tired, hopeful smile, as the image burned most vividly into his mind. None of them knew it then, but these final moments together at the end of a long, triumphant night would soon be replayed in their memories again and again, weighed down by all the questions and what-ifs that no one could have possibly anticipated. On the walk home. Stepping out of the warm glow and laughter of the Blue Lantern into the muted quiet of the college town night, Emily and Mark began their stroll homeward beneath a sky washed in the city's sodium streetlights. The air was tinged with the scent of early summer, faint cut grass, damp pavement, and cherry blossoms that lined the avenues between the bar and the campus neighborhoods. Right away, the mood between them shifted to something softer and more contemplative. The last echoes of party music faded behind them, replaced by their footsteps and the distant hum of a passing car. Emily, though exhausted, walked with her trademark purposeful stride, clutching the strap of her backpack a little tighter. Mark, usually the jokester in the group, fell uncharacteristically silent, matching her pace step for step. The only sounds were the rhythmic thwack of Emily's sneakers against the concrete and the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. Every now and then, Mark would glance sidelong at her, trying to gauge if she was really as relaxed as she seemed or if weariness was disguising something else. The route they took was familiar. From the bar they passed under stately old oak trees that canopied the residential streets, their leaves shimmering with traces of dew in the pale lamplight. Emily pointed out a pair of raccoons scuttling across a neighbor's yard, and for a moment, some of the tension dissipated as both paused to joke about animal antics from the shelter. At another corner, they crossed paths with a couple of students returning from a late-night diner run, their laughter trailing into the darkness behind them. About halfway home, Mark finally broke the silence. "You did great tonight," he said softly, almost as if he didn't want to disturb the stillness. Emily gave him a grateful smile, quiet but sincere. She shared that she was nervous about the summer ahead, and unsure about her veterinary internship placement, but she appreciated having steady friends by her side. They talked about plans for weekend hikes, about Milo, Emily's dog, and his latest misadventures, and about how strange it would feel to be apart after graduation. For Emily, these nighttime walks were usually a comfort, but tonight's stillness felt charged, almost electric. She couldn't shake the sense that everything was on the verge of changing, that this transition between college and adulthood loomed larger than test scores or party memories. As they approached the corner leading to Emily's apartment, the sidewalk seemed to stretch farther than usual, bathed in the steady, comforting beam of a street lamp overhead. The apartments themselves were hush and dark, the whole world seemingly holding its breath. When they arrived across from her building, Mark hesitated. He asked again if she wanted him to walk her all the way to her door, but, in her signature spirit of independence, Emily reassured him. They lingered there, neither wanting to be the first to say goodnight, both understanding, at some level, that ordinary nights sometimes foreshadow the most extraordinary unknowns. Emily finally squeezed his hand, smiled, and said, "See you for breakfast?" Mark nodded, watched her ascend the narrow stairs, then waited until he saw the faint glow of her apartment window. Only then, with the faintest chill rippling down his spine, did he turn and disappear into the night, retracing his steps along the silent, sleeping streets. Date of disappearance June 7, 2006, broke just like any other early summer day in College Town, Illinois. The town's iconic elms shimmered under a slant of bright morning sun, while students, fresh from the brief respite of Memorial Day, roused themselves for class, work, or a few precious hours of extra sleep. For those in the veterinary medicine program at Illinois State, though, the day started with an undercurrent of mounting anxiety, a subtle, gnawing sense that something wasn't right. Emily Dawson, meticulous and unfailingly punctual, hadn't shown up for her morning rounds at the university's animal hospital. At first no one panicked. Late nights were nothing new, especially after a raucous department party. Maybe she'd overslept, or maybe she'd decided to indulge in a much-needed morning of rest. But as the hours slipped by and the busy halls echoed with classmates swapping stories and plans for the summer, Emily's absence became increasingly conspicuous. Mark, Emily's close friend who had walked her most of the way home from the party, was the first to notice her missing. Normally Emily flicked him a text by mid-morning, a meme, a to-do list, or a simple "got in okay thanks," but his phone sat eerily quiet. At first annoyed, then increasingly uneasy, he stopped by Emily's apartment after class. The small brick building sat on a leafy residential street, its white porch railings aglow with mid-morning sunlight. He rang the doorbell, nothing. Knocked. Heard only the sounds of traffic, and just barely, the muffled yips of Milo, Emily's beagle mix, from behind the door. He called her cell, but all he got was voicemail. He peered through the curtained front window. At first glance everything looked in order. Still, as the minutes ticked by, his anxiety grew, especially when Jessica, Emily's longtime roommate, confirmed she hadn't seen or heard from Emily since the party either. Jessica mentioned that Emily hadn't left any notes or plans, which was completely out of character. No call, no explanation, no "gone for a run, back by noon" scribbled on the fridge, just radio silence. By mid-afternoon, word spread. Professors sent emails inquiring about her whereabouts. Classmates tried calling, texting, checking campus hangouts. Some recalled that Emily hadn't seemed herself during the last few days, more withdrawn, perhaps a bit frazzled, but everyone chalked it up to end-of-term stress. Her parents, meanwhile, had yet to be notified. Few people knew how close Emily was to her family, but even fewer had the heart to worry them before all other avenues had been explored. By dusk, concern had escalated into dread. Mark returned to Emily's apartment, this time with Jessica and two other friends from the shelter. The group tried the building super, who hadn't seen her since Monday afternoon. They called local hospitals on the off chance she'd been admitted with food poisoning or a hangover gone wrong. Each time, the answer came back negative. When the group assembled on Emily's front stoop, the neighborhood felt different, too quiet, the air thick with the kind of anticipation that signals something has gone deeply awry. They knocked again, their knuckles growing raw and desperate. Still nothing. Inside, the muffled barks had faded to soft, plaintive whimpers. None of the shades seemed disturbed. No one could recall hearing so much as a late-night argument or seeing Emily step out. Jessica finally broke the tension. "We have to call someone," she said. "Emily wouldn't just leave Milo, she wouldn't disappear like this." The group agreed, some reluctantly, fearing they'd be overreacting. Others determined that bureaucracy and embarrassment be damned. A friend's safety came first. Mark dialed the police. By the time two officers from College Town's modest police force arrived, night had nearly fallen. They asked the standard questions. When was the last time anyone saw Emily? Did she seem upset? Did she have a history of running away, mental health struggles, financial difficulties, conflicts with anyone? Mark answered as best he could, his mind replaying the final moments outside Emily's apartment again and again. No, she hadn't seemed particularly troubled. Tired maybe, but hopeful, busy making plans for the future. With the apartment's front door still locked and no outward signs of forced entry, the officers were cautious. But the collective insistence from friends that Emily would never just vanish finally spurred them to action. They requested Emily's parents' contact information and arranged for a welfare check to gain access to the apartment the next morning if she hadn't returned overnight. That evening, rumors percolated across group chats, department forums, and campus circles. Speculation tempered by hope that this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe Emily had slipped out early for a hiking trip, lost her phone, or simply lost track of time in the post-finals haze. But as darkness gathered, the truth settled in. This wasn't like Emily, not by a long shot. That night, Mark lay awake, replaying every detail of the walk home and their conversation at the street corner, every word, every pause. Jessica called Emily's parents to check if she had come home unexpectedly, her voice trembling. The answer was no. Milo, meanwhile, howled into the emptiness of the apartment, waiting for an owner who, for the first time in his short life, didn't return. By morning, what had begun as a ripple of worry had fanned into full-blown alarm. Initial investigation and crime scene at the apartment. It wasn't until the morning of June 8th that the reality of Emily's absence hit with full force. By noon, anxiety had evolved into urgent collective fear. Mark met with Jessica and two of Emily's close friends from the shelter. They gathered on the stoop of her small apartment building, the air saturated with summer humidity and a foreboding heaviness. Neighbors passed by, stolen glances offering both concern and curiosity, but none had news or answers. With no word from Emily and still no sign she had even left the apartment, the group agreed there was only one sensible option left: call the police. Two uniformed College Town police officers arrived within half an hour, exuding an air of local familiarity but underlying uncertainty, serious but perhaps hoping to resolve things quickly. With everyone's consent, a welfare check was authorized and, after repeated knocks were met only by Milo's distressed barking, the landlord arrived to unlock the door. The entry was a disturbing scene. The air inside Emily's apartment was thick and stale, tinged with the odor of animals who hadn't been fed for too long. Both Milo and the smaller rescue terrier greeted the intrusion with confused relief and leaps toward the door, hungry, thirsty, but unharmed. Emily, however, was nowhere to be found. The living room bore subtle signs of chaos: unfolded laundry draped over the arm of a faded sofa, schoolbooks and veterinary journals stacked haphazardly on the coffee table. The kitchen sink housed coffee mugs and a bowl streaked with the remnants of oatmeal, suggesting at least one meal had been finished in a hurry. But more unsettling than disorder was the absence, no sign that Emily had packed or left with intention, no suitcases missing, no goodbye notes, no rearrangement of her daily essentials. Her shoes were still by the door, keys on their hook, bike untouched on the patio. The only item missing appeared to be her ever-present planner, a detail that immediately struck Mark as odd. The bedroom was equally telling. Pillows were rumpled as if someone had wrestled with sleep, comforter partially dragged to the floor. A half-finished glass of water sat on the nightstand beside her phone charger, still plugged in and unused. The closet, so often meticulously arranged by color and function, seemed untouched. And yet in her absence, a chilling sense of order remained. Emily's routines, so strong they survived even her own disappearance. As the investigation began, the police cordoned off the apartment with characteristic blue tape. They snapped photos and dusted for fingerprints, combed over each square foot, and interviewed Mark and Jessica separately in the modest courtyard. Questions were precise and methodical. When had they last seen or spoken to Emily? Did they know about any enemies, recent threats, or life stresses? Had she ever spoken of wanting to get away, or seemed especially fearful or anxious? Mark recounted the walk home, the final goodbye, his growing dread as her silence stretched past its usual bounds. Jessica described Emily's habits, her early morning clinic rounds, her unwillingness to slack on responsibility, her insistence on checking in even after the busiest nights. Both insisted with growing desperation that none of this was like Emily. She would never leave her animals to fend for themselves or vanish without a word. The police soon discovered more perplexing details. Emily's wallet, with her student ID and about $40 in cash, was sitting atop a pile of mail on the kitchen counter. Her phone, a battered flip model, rested barely charged beside the microwave, a detail at once mundane and oddly significant given that most students never left home without it. A laptop, still warm, displayed a blank screen. A forensic tech later confirmed it had been abruptly powered down in the early morning hours 2 nights prior, rather than shut down normally, as was Emily's habit. The digital rabbit hole beckoned, but answers would prove elusive here too. A muggy summer afternoon gave way to a restless dusk as evidence techs cataloged and collected items: pet hair, traces of skin cells, scraps of notepaper with names and numbers, anything that might provide a thread to follow. The mood among friends shifted from frantic hope to hollowed shock. Together, Jessica and Mark fed Emily's pets and sat on the porch alternately silent, then meticulously recalling every word, glance, or gesture from the last time they'd seen her. No fresh footprints were found in the mass of pine needles covering the patio, nor did any neighbor recall a stranger coming or going. When Emily's parents arrived late that evening, the scene was surreal. Luggage in hand, numb from the drive, greeted by flashing police lights and the anguished faces of their daughter's closest confidants. The reunion was raw, grief and confusion blending in embraces, everyone straining to answer questions no one should have to ask. Her mother, trembling accusatory, insisted Emily would never have left Milo. Her father, ever the pragmatist, scoured her books and emails for answers in vain. Friends offered up everything: anecdotes, text messages, observations of ever so slight changes in Emily's personality in the past week. A little more tired, perhaps a touch preoccupied, but not depressed, not reckless. Nothing that could explain what they now faced. As investigators pieced together a timeline, certain oddities loomed. The spiral-bound planner, missing. Receipts in the trash, one time-stamped after midnight on the night she vanished, from a convenience store Emily sometimes visited on her way home. The register clerk remembered nothing. Security cameras revealed nothing more than a woman in a ponytail, obscured by a hoodie. Possibly Emily, possibly not. Down the hall from her apartment, a neighbor recalled a dog barking furiously in the early hours, unusual but not cause for concern in a building full of animal lovers. By midnight, the apartment was quiet again, only police tape and a thickening file of witness statements. For all the methodical gathering of clues, the case already felt slippery, frustratingly absent of motive or explanation. In those first 24 hours, what set the investigation apart wasn't any one clue, but the palpable sense that something profoundly wrong had slipped in beneath the ordinary rhythms of a student's life, and whatever trail there once was, it threatened to vanish as swiftly as Emily herself. Strange clues and acts of concealment. Sometimes, in the bright light of a police investigation, it's not what's present at a scene that speaks loudest, but rather what's missing or what's been tampered with. In Emily Dawson's apartment, after the initial shock of her disappearance had passed, an uncanny sense of everything being subtly off permeated the tiny living space. For detectives, these negative spaces, the slightly off-kilter picture frame, the towel still damp in the hamper, the mismatched details, stood out as much as bloodstains or shattered glass ever would in another case. Mark and Jessica, her stalwart friends, had been waiting anxiously as the police completed their initial search. In their nervousness, the urge to help kicked in, though neither realized at the time how delicate an active investigation could be. Attempting to clear up the mounting disorder, Jessica started picking up stray clothes, folding them out of habit. She loaded a small pile of laundry into the washing machine, oblivious to the fact that she might be washing away crucial evidence. While stacking some books and dusting a corner shelf, Jessica's hand brushed a cluster of petals from a wilted bouquet onto the floor. She frowned. Emily hadn't been given flowers at the party, as far as anyone could remember. Had someone visited her late at night after the celebration? Or had she bought the blooms herself as a treat? The bouquet's cellophane was still crumpled near the trash, flecked with bits of potting soil, implying it arrived fresh just days before her disappearance. The questions stacked up, each detail a possible thread, each thread threatening to unravel the unassuming tapestry of Emily's final days. Other objects, too, seemed slightly out of their natural context. There was a roll of bills, $400 in cash, folded neatly atop the bedroom dresser, left in plain sight rather than hidden as Emily usually did. A half-smoked pack of cigarettes sat on the windowsill, the brand unfamiliar to both Mark and Jessica. Neither remembered Emily ever smoking, and the sharp, spicy odor still lingering was far from the gentle traces of lavender she usually favored. Had a stranger visited her recently? Had someone stayed overnight, watching out the window in the darkness while Emily slept, blissfully unaware? Compounding these oddities were the footprints, smudged and faint on the hardwood, but unmistakable in the morning light. One set matched the sneakers Emily wore that night, but a second set, heavier and larger, trailed into the hall and lingered near the back entrance before fading away entirely. The police speculated quietly about the possibility of a second individual entering or exiting in the pre-dawn hours, a prospect that filled everyone with an unnerving chill. In the middle of the living room, Jessica uncovered a pile of wet towels and 2 pairs of underwear, clearly just laundered but never folded or put away. The machine paused mid-cycle, betraying haste, and droplets of water still clung to the porthole. It was a domestic scene at odds with Emily's usual orderliness. She never left chores half-finished, and certainly didn't let laundry sit for hours. Had she started cleaning up after the party, only to be interrupted? Or had something more sinister interrupted her routine? Mark, already tense with guilt and confusion, wandered into the kitchen searching for any overlooked clue. What he found only deepened the sense of unreality. On the windowsill behind the sink was a small pyramid of spent matchsticks, evidence of repeated nervous lighting, or perhaps signaling a surreptitious guest. Near it rested a delicately folded piece of notepaper bearing only a hastily scribbled phone number and the cryptic phrase, "Call if trouble." Mark dialed it in front of police, but the line rang to a disconnected tone, a dead end just as chilling as any threatening message might have been. Meanwhile, on the living room coffee table, police noted a set of perfectly aligned coasters and a mug stained with fresh lipstick. Emily's typical routine was tea in the evenings and coffee in the mornings, but the lipstick shade was foreign. It was as if someone else had sat in her seat mimicking Emily's rituals in the dead of night. These were not the only traces of an interloper. On the entryway mat, a muddy partial boot print didn't fit any shoe in Emily's closet, nor those of her guests. Perhaps most disturbingly, when detectives dusted for prints on the apartment's back door, they found clear evidence that the lock had recently been forced with a thin object. It wasn't broken, merely scratched in a way that suggested practiced but hurried entry. The implication was clear. Someone had entered the apartment either late that night or early in the morning without a key. The notion of a stranger slipping in and out while Emily's friends and her dog slept only deepened the sense of dread among all who cared for her. Back in the small bedroom, Jessica discovered a suitcase beneath the bed, half-packed with clothes, travel toiletries, and a guide to Chicago transit tickets. Emily's parents insisted she had no plans for a trip. She hated surprises and always left a careful note. Was this evidence of a hasty escape, or something staged to mislead investigators? None of the pieces added up, and the more evidence police gathered, the greater the sense of deliberate disruption. The strangest finds weren't always physical. Police reviewing the building's garbage room found, among the heaps of ordinary trash, a dismantled wooden coffee table with one leg partially splintered and a faint smudge of what looked like animal blood, odd for Emily, who was careful never to bring her work home in that sense. When asked, neighbors remembered the table being dragged out early on June 6th, but no one thought it suspicious at the time. More evocative was the discovery of, and later analysis of, a single torn student ID card, portions melted as if someone had tried to destroy evidence of Emily's identity. Between forensic teams combing over every object for clues, and friends replaying every gesture or glance from the previous days, paranoia began to creep in. Jessica, racked with guilt, worried that her well-intended tidying may have inadvertently erased crucial tracks. Even Mark's memory started to fray under pressure. He questioned whether he'd truly closed the back door that night, or if, in the haze of anxiety, he'd imagined locking it at all. It was during this time of confusion that the first real whispers of a cover-up started to circulate. Was someone close to Emily hiding something, whether out of fear, shame, or a desperate desire to protect her? The police kept returning to the curious fact that only a handful of people, her tight circle of friends, her landlord, and a select few in her department, knew the details of Emily's living situation and daily routines. Could any of them have slipped up, been followed, or inadvertently let a predator into her world? Adding to the atmosphere of concealment, the digital evidence produced both more leads and more mysteries. Emily's laptop, somewhat battered but faithfully maintained, had been abruptly hard-powered off rather than properly shut down, a break from her meticulous habits. The machine's activity log revealed internet searches for phrases like sexual harassment complaint and talking to police in the early morning hours of her disappearance, implying she was unsettled enough to research these at 3 a.m. But why hadn't she left any written record or texted for help? The police cataloged these online traces and compared them with the timeline of her last known movements. While no new social media updates or emails surfaced, someone had logged into Emily's account twice in the hours after 3 a.m., unsuccessfully inputting her password 3 times before access was locked out for attempted security breaches. Police couldn't tell if the person fumbled due to stress, unfamiliarity, or simply tried to cover digital tracks amid all this. Perhaps the most haunting element for friends and family was the subtle sense of intentionality, the unnerving feeling that whoever orchestrated these strange details moved with a blend of desperation and calculation. The laundry, the suitcase, the missing coffee table, the unfamiliar cigarette butts, the forced door, all felt like pieces of a carefully staged puzzle. Every new development deepened the enigma and cast a shadow of doubt not only over College Town, but even over those closest to Emily. Did someone want her to disappear or merely keep the truth forever out of reach? In those fevered days of searching, suspicion seeped into every interaction. Neighbors eyed one another warily, friends questioned their own recollections, and Emily's apartment, so recently a place of warmth and order, became a silent testament to fear, secrets, and the chilling possibility that the real clue was in what was no longer there. Technological irregularities and digital footprints. In the labyrinthine puzzle of Emily Dawson's disappearance, one of the most puzzling and consequential threads revolved around digital technology, her laptop, phone, and the scattered breadcrumbs left behind in cyberspace. At first glance, her modestly sized apartment yielded only the ordinary electronics of a diligent grad student: a battered flip phone resting silently on the kitchen counter, a well-used laptop perched on her desk, and an alarm clock blinking steadily through the night. But beneath these seemingly mundane objects, the initial investigators soon realized, lurked a disturbing series of technological anomalies that hinted at a web of hidden fears, midnight activity, and attempted deception. The first sign that something was amiss came from Emily's laptop. Mark, who had grown familiar with Emily's meticulous digital habits during their joint study sessions, noticed immediately that her device looked out of place. The machine had been left powered down, not unusual in itself, except that Emily, obsessive about her work, very rarely turned off her laptop. Instead, she usually let it sleep with half-written notes and research tabs perpetually open. Jessica corroborated this, adding that Emily's desktop always displayed her to-do list for the next day. Yet, forensic analysis revealed a stark break in pattern. The laptop had been abruptly hard-powered off at 4:21 a.m. on the morning following the party, rather than properly shut down or set to sleep. The event logs revealed a series of furious keystrokes and abrupt, unceremonious disconnection, almost as if someone in a panic had simply pressed and held the power button to kill the machine, severing all connection to what it might reveal. More alarming was the browser history. Forensic techs working for College Town's small police department quickly identified a handful of queries made between 2:54 and 3:05 a.m. on June 6. The search terms were both specific and unsettling: sexual harassment complaint university procedures, local police anonymous tip line, how to prove someone is following you, and most chilling of all, signs apartment is being watched. These searches spoke of the mental state of someone feeling hunted, fearful, and desperate for actionable help, yet no trace of an outgoing email or digital plea for intervention was found in any of Emily's sent folders, drafts, or discarded texts. Complicating matters, the laptop's internet connection had blinked in and out on a suspicious schedule. The digital forensics team reconstructed activity windows, showing the Wi-Fi was disconnected 3 separate times in the hour before the abrupt shutdown, the kind of micro-behavior seen when someone is worried about being surveilled, or trying to avoid live tracking. No VPN or proxy software was present, but it appeared someone had made multiple attempts to cover their tracks, at least superficially. There were caches deleted, browser histories wiped, and fragments of files bearing only partial download signatures, enough to suggest hasty attempts at erasure, but not enough to fully vanish from forensic view. The flip phone was likewise a wellspring of contradiction. Though physically present in the house, and, according to her friends, never left behind by Emily, the device showed scarcely any activity after 1:40 a.m. on June 6th. There were no outgoing texts or calls in her usual cadence. Oddly, 2 draft messages were found, unsent and half-composed. The first was a bland, "Hi Mom, I'm okay, just busy, sorry," truncated by a string of random characters as if she'd been interrupted mid-typing. The second, addressed to Mark, simply read, "Are you awake?" and stopped there. Neither message ever made it to a recipient. Police found no evidence the phone had been used to call for help, but the call logs revealed one short 5-second dial at 3:11 a.m., an unregistered out-of-state number. A follow-up with the telecom provider revealed the call never properly connected and the number was likely a VoIP or burner phone, an infuriating dead end. Next came the digital security systems of the apartment building itself. College Town's campus area housing was slow to update to modern standards. Instead of a sophisticated surveillance array, there was a basic buzzer system with cloud-linked entry logs. Access logs for the front and rear doors were spotty, but between 2:45 and 3:10 a.m., the entry system showed ghostly activity. A single remote ring at Emily's apartment number from the vestibule, a minute-long attempt to access the rear service door, and a failed swipe of an unknown RFID card at 3:03 a.m. The timestamps overlapped with the internet search activity on Emily's laptop, suggesting someone was operating both the computer and the entryway, or that 2 people were involved in simultaneous but distinct actions. Investigators, realizing the potential for more digital evidence, served a preservation request to Emily's university email and cloud storage accounts. Here, the digital trail grew only more obscured. Emily's cloud drive had apparently been accessed remotely from an unfamiliar IP address at 4:13 a.m., well after she was last seen. The forensic report noted that several personal files and photos had been deleted in quick succession, mostly related to her veterinary coursework and private journals. Revision logs documented staccato-like deletions, some restored and then deleted again, as if someone was working in an agitated, uncertain state. Curiously, Emily's password manager revealed multiple failed login attempts between 3:23 and 4:09 a.m., both on her home Wi-Fi and a second network nearby. Friends insisted Emily never shared passwords. She had always scoffed at reusing them, but on the night she vanished, someone had entered a dozen incorrect combinations on several social media and email platforms, locking out her accounts. Whether it was Emily herself, frantically trying to lock someone out, or a would-be intruder hoping to access her messages, was never definitively established. Beyond Emily's apartment, digital footprints radiated outward like ripples. An old desktop computer in her campus lab, rarely used but not password protected, showed that someone during the early hours of June 6th had inserted a USB drive. File logs left behind by university IT contained a cryptic list, dissertation_final draft.docs, vethospinternships 2026.doc, and, most ominously, an untitled notepad file that read only, "You are not safe." The fingerprinting on the keyboard and mouse was contaminated after several people touched it in the initial confusion, but timestamps didn't lie. The files were accessed between 3:35 and 3:50 a.m., overlapping uncomfortably with the timeline when Emily's home laptop went dark. Interviews with neighbors and lab staff revealed further anomalies. A night janitor in the adjacent building recalled seeing a faint blue glow from the lab window after closing, but thought nothing of it. Security badge logs showed no clear evidence that Emily, or any of her friends, accessed the lab during these hours, raising questions of whether someone had tailgated an authorized student inside. The police, lacking clear video, could only speculate. Finally, digital surveillance extended to the greater College Town area. Cell tower pings placed Emily's phone in her apartment from the time she and Mark parted ways until at least 4:10 a.m., after which there was a final, faint ping associated with a nearby tower closer to the river. Whether she, or someone else, carried the phone, or if it was left behind and powered down later, was inconclusive. Search teams scanned the short walkways and wooded areas by the river over the following days, but found neither Emily nor her phone nor anything else to suggest a direction or outcome. In the end, the digital evidence, while abundant, created as many questions as it answered. The pattern painted by her laptop, phone, and building logs reflected chaos, hurried decisions, and the sense of someone in fear or under pressure. Even months later, the digital forensics team, working the College Town case, described the file deletions, odd logins, and mysterious midnight searches as an information ecosystem disturbed in a moment of panic. For family and friends, the technological clues were both a torment and a lifeline. They represented the last shadowy connections to Emily on a night that otherwise vanished into silence. To the police, they were maddening slivers of truth, fragments of a digital narrative they were never able to fully reconstruct, trails of ones and zeros that promised more than they ever truly revealed. Clues in the laboratory. The sun had just started to spill its gold through the arched windows of the Veterinary Sciences building when two janitors noticed something odd in the pathology lab. The desks were usually methodically arranged, whiteboards crammed with enthusiastic notes from late-night review sessions and scribbles about anatomy lectures. Yet this particular morning, room 204 bore attention that was more felt than seen, a kind of unsettled hush that hinted at secrets left hanging in the air. It was in this very room that one of the first concrete clues about Emily's fate would be uncovered. When campus police arrived at the lab following the reports of her disappearance, they were greeted by a group of uneasy faculty, 2 lab assistants, and a handful of students who'd taken to gathering in silent worry. Detective Harrison, young but known for his methodical approach, flashed his badge and got to work gently but firmly, asking everyone to wait outside as he and a forensic technician began their search. Emily's presence in the lab was immediately apparent. Notebooks, personal pens, and a worn engraved name tag with her initials ED rested on one of the benches by the far wall, as if she'd only nipped out for coffee. Yet something was off. The bench surface was smudged with what first appeared to be dust, but, under the technician's flashlight, turned out to be faint powder from a pair of blue nitrile gloves, gloves that matched the open, half-used box on the shelf above. In the trash, a balled-up set of gloves, torn and stained with animal blood, led to speculation. Had Emily tended to a difficult surgical specimen before she left for good, or was there something she tried to hide? Then came the discovery that would unsettle even the most seasoned investigator. Emily's spiral-bound planner. It was sitting closed but neatly aligned beside her backpack, stacked between a handful of anatomy workbooks and a half-empty Starbucks cup. The last entry, scrawled quickly in blue ink, read, 5/6, afternoon dissection lab, dinner after. There were no anxious doodles, no cryptic warnings, just the cool, practical handwriting of a student juggling obligations. Oddly, wedged inside the planner were 2 objects that would prompt much debate. The first, a crumpled receipt, time-stamped just after midnight from a 24-hour convenience store 1 block from her apartment. It listed only orange juice and a pack of gum, neither item known to be her favorite. Had Emily made a late-night run, or had someone else used her cash and gone shopping under her name? The second object was scarier, a torn corner of notepaper, bearing only a partial phone number and the word urgent. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, markedly different from the careful script of Emily's journal entries. Detective Harrison took a crisp photo of the note and slipped it into an evidence bag, instructing the technician to preserve any trace prints for later analysis. Further searching yielded other oddities. Emily's personal locker was unlocked, an anomaly given her usual caution. Inside, nothing seemed stolen, but her school-issued coat was missing. The only sign of disturbance, a small bottle of antiseptic tipped over, a smear of ointment on a file folder's edge. On the whiteboard, a faded reminder read, "Organize freezer samples before Thursday," with Emily's name beneath it. The most chilling discovery, though, lay behind a stack of biohazard containers near the rear of the room, a single latex glove inside out with tiny cuts along the palm, almost as if the wearer had clenched something sharp in panic. Nearby, beneath the microscope camera, a memory card was half-slotted, as though someone had begun documenting slides only to pull away in a rush. The card's contents would later reveal no images of that night, but several hastily deleted files and a video fragment of someone's shadow moving past the bench. The footage was grainy, inconclusive, enough to torment but not to clarify. Word of these developments swept the college, growing in speculation with every retelling. Some classmates whispered about Emily's meticulous habits, the fact that she never left personal items in the lab overnight unless in a hurry or distress. Others remembered odd details from previous days: an unfamiliar SUV seen idling outside the science wing, an incident in which Emily received a cryptic text during a lab session and paled noticeably. Professors reviewed campus access logs and found that Emily's ID swipe last registered entry at 4:17 p.m. on June 5th, with no record of exit till long after she'd supposedly gone home. Had she doubled back late at night, or did someone else enter under her name? Curiosity soon turned to unease. A faculty assistant confessed that late on June 5th, she'd heard the automated building doors thump shut after hours. She'd assumed it was a security guard, but now the timing matched the window when Emily could have returned, or been pursued, after the party. A discarded packet of tissues smeared with foundation matching Emily's skin tone was found near the women's restroom adjoining the lab, and a faint footprint, clearly a woman's sneaker, was preserved in dust outside the emergency stairwell. Forensics carefully dusted for trace evidence. Only Emily's DNA would be found, but the presence of a cigarette butt, from a brand Emily didn't use, raised additional flags. As for the coffee table that had vanished from Emily's apartment, its fate would soon intersect with the forensic search in the lab. When detectives canvassed nearby dumpsters, they found the table's remains hidden beneath a mound of discarded class projects, splintered as though taken apart in haste. Someone recognized the blue paint on one leg. It matched a streak left months ago during a chaotic group study session in this very building's lounge. The implication? Whoever disposed of the table, perhaps to remove some hidden trace, had both knowledge of Emily's personal life and unhurried access to campus facilities after midnight. The investigation into the lab scene was painstaking. Time and again, friends, faculty, and law enforcement traced paths through the maze of chilled sample storage, battered supply carts, and silent lecture halls. Each time the same impression re-emerged. Emily's presence was everywhere: her careful notes, her signature on lab checklists, even her half-finished snack bars in the fridge, and yet she was nowhere at all. Like a shadow erased, her ordinary routine had been abruptly, violently disrupted, but by what, or by whom, remained unfathomable. By the end of that first frantic week, the pathology lab, once a place of learning and laughter, became a site of haunted speculation. Some began to dread entering at night, unnerved by the sense of something left open-ended: a missing friend, a torn note, traces of panic forever sealed in time. It was there, in the eerie quiet of beeping freezers and the soft hum of fluorescent lights, that the story of Emily's disappearance deepened, radiating outward in ever-widening circles of uncertainty. Suspicions surrounding family and friends. From the earliest days of Emily Dawson's disappearance, the spotlight inevitably fell upon those closest to her, the people who had woven themselves most tightly into the fabric of her daily life. For investigators, this wasn't merely a procedural matter, it was a necessary, if painful, method for separating the truth from the haze of shock and grief. Even in the warmest, most close-knit communities, the bitter reality persisted. The majority of cases like Emily's are, statistically, entwined with someone the victim knows. It started, as these things often do, with questions. Why hadn't anyone heard from Emily since walking her home? How well did her friends, like Mark and Jessica, truly know what she was going through? Had there been fractures in her social circle, unseen rivalries beneath the surface harmony, or jealousies simmering where nobody cared to look? The pressure was unrelenting, both for the investigators, who knew public opinion could turn with a whisper, and for Emily's family and friends, who realized the people they trusted most were now uncomfortably under the microscope. For Mark, the scrutiny was immediate and intrusive. It was one thing to grieve for a missing friend. It was another to know that every word, every action, every shared memory was being combed for inconsistency. Mark and Emily's close friendship was well known, and as whispers fanned out across campus, some wondered aloud about the boundaries of their relationship. Mark had walked Emily home that night, but why hadn't he insisted on accompanying her to the front door? Was his version of events as precise as he remembered, or had he left out details, a slip of timing, a missed goodbye, a moment when Emily seemed more vulnerable than she let on? Detectives conducted lengthy interviews with him, sometimes in gentle tones of encouragement, but increasingly with an edge of skepticism. Mark, for his part, tried to answer honestly, even as the weight of suspicion began to gnaw at the corners of his composure. He submitted his clothing for forensic testing, recounted the night's events a dozen times, stood for polygraph exams and, when results proved inconclusive, faced the grueling reality that an unblemished record was never enough when grief and motive intersected. The blood found on his shirt, animal not human, added a confusing but ultimately exculpatory footnote. His alibi for the early hours of June 6, corroborated by security camera footage near his apartment, eventually eased but did not entirely erase the lingering shadow of doubt. Jessica, Emily's roommate and confidant, faced her own barrage of questions. Investigators explored the possibility of tensions between the two, not uncommon, they pointed out, in the stress-soaked environment of final exams and the looming end of college. They pressed her about arguments over household chores, petty resentments, or even jealousy over Emily's academic achievements and friendships. Through tears and measured breaths, Jessica described a strong but at times complicated friendship. She admitted that in the week before Emily vanished, there had been late-night talks that edged uncomfortably close to confessions. Emily expressing anxiety about unseen pressures, Jessica responding with concern tinged by helplessness. But, she insisted, there was no stranger lurking in their home, no unspoken rage boiling up between them. Still, when police discovered Jessica had unknowingly washed and folded some of Emily's clothes the morning after she disappeared, possibly erasing important evidence, the tone sharpened. Was it a well-intentioned act, or a calculated effort to cover up someone's tracks? For days, Jessica felt as if she floated through her life while surrounded by invisible detectives, each conversation somehow an inquisition. Emily's other friends, her animal shelter crew, classmates, and even passing acquaintances, were invited sometimes unwillingly into the orbit of suspicion. The police asked if anyone had recently grown distant, harbored an unrequited infatuation, or shown signs of obsession. Subtle rivalries were dissected, disagreements over project leadership, sharp words exchanged in stress-filled group chats, rumors of broken confidences. Mundane actions were re-examined in a sinister light. Did someone resent Emily's success, her easy rapport with professors, her ability to balance social responsibility and academic brilliance? Did one friend, eager to prank her, inadvertently let a stranger know her daily schedule by posting online? As law enforcement mapped out tangles of social connection, even gestures of worry, too many phone calls, frantic texts, repeated visits to the police, transformed into potential red flags. This climate took its heaviest toll on Emily's family. Her parents, already weathering terrible uncertainty, found themselves interrogated about their last conversations with their daughter. Had there been disagreements about her future path, conflicts over financial concerns, or veiled dissatisfaction about her independence? Old wounds were probed. Her mother replayed their final call, searching for coded messages that might reveal a secret plea for help. Her father, doggedly practical, fielded questions about Emily's childhood, any history of running away, and whether the family's rural privacy had shielded dysfunction as well as closeness. They opened their email and phone records, desperate to prove not only their innocence, but also to demonstrate the strength of their bond. Even the wider community was forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Neighbors reported that a woman living across the hall had once been seen arguing with Emily in the laundry room, a confrontation over noise complaints that now seemed more loaded in retrospect. A teaching assistant recalled a tense moment in class between Emily and a rival for a coveted internship. Nothing dramatic at the time, but now, a possible motive. The principal at the animal shelter offered up staff schedules, noting that one volunteer had abruptly stopped coming after the disappearance. Each revelation felt both profound and excruciatingly ordinary, a reminder that behind every missing person case, the landscape of relationships is riddled with moments of friction, misunderstanding, and unresolved tension. Social media, meanwhile, stoked the fires further. Online forums filled with speculation, amateur sleuths and tipsters claiming insider knowledge about secret affairs, clandestine grudges, or late-night arguments caught on blurry security footage. Friends and family found themselves forced to respond publicly, defending not just their grief, but their character, as empathy for their suffering sometimes curdled into suspicion. If suspicion bred division, it also created unexpected alliances. Mark and Jessica, despite the cloud hanging over them, formed an unspoken pact to support each other through interrogations, public scrutiny, and the gnawing self-doubt that comes when people wonder if your sorrow is real. Emily's parents found solace in the steadfast support of College Town's clergy, who held vigils and issued quiet reminders that suffering should unite rather than divide. Ultimately, the intense examination of Emily's inner circle yielded more insight into her life than to the question of her disappearance. It emerged that, far from living free of trouble, Emily had managed an intricate balancing act of anxieties, school, debt, career, and a profound desire to be everything to everyone. Her friends, subjected to the crucible of suspicion, grew more certain of two things. First, that they had truly never known the full story of Emily's struggles, and second, that none of them, however flawed or forgetful, bore the mark of a perpetrator. Law enforcement, having exhausted every lead and examined every close relationship under the harshest possible light, was eventually forced to look outward, to the possibility of a stranger, a staff member at the bar, a visitor to College Town with no reason to stay. But for everyone close to Emily, the sting of suspicion lingered long after the cameras left and the headlines faded. Some relationships frayed and never recovered, others grew stronger and shared adversity, but all were forever marked by those fevered days of uncertainty, when every secret and every kindness became a potential clue. The fear-named stranger. For the residents of College Town, the phrase, stranger danger, had always felt like something reserved for after-school specials and urban legends. That all changed in the restless weeks after Emily Dawson vanished. What began as passing anxiety morphed into an ever-tightening atmosphere of paranoia and dread, fueled by sporadic witness accounts and unsettling evidence that suggested an unknown presence lurking on the edges of their world. The first tremors of fear ran through the tight-knit, off-campus apartment complex where Emily lived. Within days of her disappearance, a neighboring student, Maria Velasquez, hesitantly came forward. Her testimony was shaky but unmistakably genuine, the kind of fear that's hard to fake. Maria recounted, in hushed tones to detectives, that in the nights leading up to Emily's disappearance, she had sensed someone watching her as she rushed up the stairs to her flat. The feeling was more than just nerves. Footsteps echoed a half-beat behind her, lingering just long enough to force her to clutch her keys tighter and quicken her pace. On one occasion, as she reached her door, she risked a glance back and swore she saw a shapeless figure retreat into the deep shadow of a service stairwell. She never got more than a fleeting glimpse. A broad-shouldered shape, a hooded head, the smallest glint of streetlight reflecting in his eyes. Then nothing. It was enough to keep every resident on edge long before the news broke about Emily. This was not, it turned out, an isolated incident. Word filtered through campus group chats, whispered during late-night study sessions and over rounds of coffee in the university commons. Another student in the same building, a quiet graduate assistant named Devin, mentioned that his sense of security had been chipped away thanks to a string of minor disturbances, an unfamiliar man seen smoking at the edge of the lot in the small hours, the laundry room door, usually jammed shut, left wide open, the lights in the vacant apartment opposite Emily's unit flickering at midnight when nobody was supposed to be there. All of these were nothing on their own, but together, they painted a picture of an interloper crossing invisible boundaries, pushing past locked doors and settled routines. Police attention shifted to the vacant unit across the hall from Emily's. During their initial canvass, officers found discarded cigarette butts, wadded-up tissues, even a battered fast-food coffee cup, hidden behind a half-closed bathroom door. The forensic team dusted for prints and bagged the detritus, but the results were inconclusive. The fingerprints, if present, were too smudged to match to anyone in the database. But the sheer fact that someone had been sleeping rough mere feet from Emily's door made the hair stand up on the back of everyone's necks. Emily's friends experienced these scares acutely. Jessica, still racked with guilt and worry, began double-locking their door at night and pepper-spraying the entryway just in case. She told police about a strange scratching at their peephole late one night, not loud but repetitive, like someone testing the lock. Mark, determined to protect what was left of normalcy, scoured neighborhood forums for any mention of prowlers or break-ins, and became a self-appointed watchman for Emily's floor, even as his own nerves frayed at the edges. It was all futile, and they knew it, but the prospect of a faceless stranger invading Emily's sanctuary had taken root deeply in their minds. The wider community started to feel the chilling effect. Pet owners began waking up to find their outside gates ajar or garden lights unscrewed, small things that were easy to chalk up to mistake, until they happened in clusters. A delivery driver reported that during his overnight route, He'd seen someone duck quickly behind the brick signpost near Emily's building when a squad car passed. It was enough to prompt calls for increased patrols and emergency campus meetings. These rumors coalesced into ghost stories, fueling a local legend that College Town had a shadow, a nameless man with no connection but a disturbing interest in the girls who lived along that quiet side street. Detectives were forced to explore all avenues, however unlikely. They handed out flyers to bar regulars at the Blue Lantern and any late-shift workers who might recognize the descriptions. Memories blurred in the retelling. A man with a limp, or maybe just an odd gait, a face partly hidden by a baseball cap, a voice deep and gruff that had once mumbled something incoherent while hanging at the corner. The composite sketches, produced more out of desperation than clear recollection, felt every bit as shapeless and disquieting as the figure that haunted Maria and Devon's memories. The investigation dug into police logs for similar cases: unexplained break-ins, missing pets, cars keyed with odd glyphs, student reports of being followed home late at night. There were, maddeningly, dozens of such incidents over the prior 2 years, rarely serious enough for more than a campus alert or a passing mention. But laid side by side, the pattern emerged. Young women, usually alone, always at night, always near the outer edges of campus housing. Few of them had reported their worries at the time: embarrassment, fear of overreacting, or the self-blame so common in such situations. In hindsight, it all took on a different, much darker cast. Local conspiracy theorists, never far from a public tragedy, took up the call as well. They posted surveillance footage from private doorbell cams online, fuzzy videos that seemed to show a mysterious person loitering near dumpsters or pacing empty parking lots at 2 a.m. messages pinged around social media. Watch out for the midnight stalker. Don't walk home alone. For parents and students alike, the old advice gained teeth. Nobody felt safe anymore. Yet in the official record, the stranger was always one step ahead. Despite multiple stakeouts, late-night patrols, and police appeals, no one was ever caught lingering around the complex. The few new sightings came from tired witnesses, many of whom later admitted to confusing shadows for people or letting the power of suggestion get the better of them. But the cumulative effect was undeniable. Doors closed earlier, streets emptied at dusk, and every unexplained sound became a source of fear. For those closest to Emily, the thought of a stranger, a predator, a voyeur, someone who had crept in through a literal or figurative back door, became the most compelling and terrifying of all possible explanations. It offered a perverse comfort, evil as accident, a random tragedy rather than a betrayal from within. But it also meant a grim uncertainty, an antagonist who could never be confronted or blamed or exonerated. In the end, the fear-named stranger was not simply about one man, but about the sense of security that Emily's disappearance had shattered for an entire town. Her case left behind a legacy of padlocks on bedroom doors, pepper spray on keychains, and teach-ins on personal safety. More than anything, it made visible the silent, invisible dread that creeps in when the line between here and out there blurs, and when what or who is lurking outside remains forever unknown. An open-ended ending. The case remains unsolved. As the haze of speculation, investigation, and rumor gradually gave way to the routine drudgery of daily life, the mystery of Emily Dawson's disappearance was left to settle like fine dust over every corner of College Town. The case, despite an exhaustive inquiry and a community desperate for closure, stubbornly refused to yield any definitive answers. In those first days, search parties combed through woodland parks, local rivers, and alleys. Volunteers posted flyers with Emily's hopeful face on every bulletin board, in every pizza shop window, and on every lamppost within a 10-mile radius. Yet nothing, no matching sightings, no voice on a midnight phone line, no anonymous tip that led anywhere concrete, emerged to pierce the darkness that had swallowed her up. As the weeks turned to months, then stretched into years, the designation missing person hardened into something more permanent, more painful. Cold case. The police, their original task force long since reassigned to other crimes, filed away box after box of evidence, hoping that even the smallest detail, one overlooked fingerprint and untested DNA sample, a stray security camera frame, might someday be revisited under new, more revealing light. There was always the haunting possibility that something critical had been missed for want of resources, or more cruelly, for want of imagination. The local news, after its initial flurry of sympathetic headlines and primetime appeals, faded its coverage to annual anniversary reports. Stock footage, familiar pleas, and a rolling ticker of unsolved tragedies. For Emily's family, each passing season was marked by a peculiar blend of hope, fear, and resignation. Her parents, who had once driven nightly circuits through College Town's neighborhoods in a vain effort to spot their daughter's backpack or beloved beagle Milo astray, kept her room untouched at home, her high school trophies perfectly aligned, a half-finished embroidery project left waiting. Holidays became moments of both sanctuary and torment. The empty chair at Thanksgiving was set regardless, and her mother still mailed birthday cards to Emily's address, unwilling to let the post office destroy returned mail. The ripple effect extended far beyond genetic ties. Mark and Jessica, once inseparable through shared laughter and last-minute study sessions, now found themselves pulled together only by the gravity of loss. They built private rituals for remembrance, a coffee at the Blue Lantern every June, a long walk past Emily's favorite river spot every exam week. Both struggled with survivor's guilt, questioning what subtle signals they'd missed, what words unsaid might have shifted fate, and whether their desire to move on would ever be morally permissible. Sometimes their ongoing pain flared into anger, not only at the unknown perpetrator if such a figure existed, but at the process itself. Both felt the investigation's unfulfilled promise, the exhaustion of suspicion, and the quiet tyranny of routine questions, "Have they found her yet?" that became the normal soundtrack of their young adulthood. Within the larger campus and community, a subtle but impactful change took hold. Students in the years after Emily's disappearance received campus safety tips as part of orientation. Never walk home alone, always tell friends where you're going, don't ignore feelings of unease. New security cameras sprouted along the river trail and in dormitory lobbies. Summer evenings that once echoed with spontaneous laughter now felt quieter, tinged with the anxiety that it could happen to anyone. Yet, as the case froze in procedural limbo, theories metastasized. Through forums and hyperlocal podcasts, townsfolk and curious outsiders mulled over the same pieces of evidence for years. Some spun intricate narratives implicating friends, professors, or a shadowy outsider. Others posited with aching hope that Emily had engineered her own vanishing, fleeing under a false name, lost in a bigger world. In the absence of truth, myth filled the vacuum. On certain anniversaries, stories circulated of lone women seen walking the riverbank at dawn, or fleeting phone calls received with a single breath and silence at the end of the line. The missing spiral-bound planner became a near-mythic artifact, a stand-in for answers just out of reach. The police, for their part, filed periodic updates. The investigation remains open and ongoing. All leads are welcome. Each public statement was tinged with a weariness that comes from chasing shadows. Yet, in private, many officers admitted the case haunted them. Some spent off hours reviewing old files, re-interviewing witnesses as circumstances allowed, holding on to the belief that even the darkest mysteries sometimes yield in the end. In the digital era, online sleuths kept the flame alive. Reddit threads dissected footnotes from police reports, matched timestamps from security badge logs, and debated the meaning of half-legible text messages discovered on Emily's phone. True crime podcasts devoted multi-episode arcs to the case, at times inadvertently casting suspicion and pain anew on friends and family just trying to heal. Through it all, the sense of uncompleted narrative, the ache that nothing had been truly finished, lingered. Over time, the nature of remembrance itself shifted. Emily's memory moved from daily headline to legend, a cautionary tale, an unsolved riddle that defined a generation of College Town students. New residents who never met her and only heard her story in whispers still felt her absence in the caution with which they locked their doors or walked home after dark. The unanswered questions created echoes that refused to fade. Did she leave of her own volition or by force? Did someone who loved her turn against her, or was a nameless danger stalking the quiet streets of College Town? In the hearts of those who loved her, when hope flickered, it did so with a kind of wild defiance. Her parents kept a candle in the kitchen window, its wax rebuilt as needed, a beacon for a lost child, and a challenge to despair itself. The community, bound by shared loss, gathered each year for a silent vigil. Some prayed for her return, others simply for peace or for the truth, whatever it might bring. 20 years on, a single fact reverberates. Emily Dawson is still missing, and the web of stories, doubts, and heartbreak surrounding her disappearance remains unbroken. The evidence is cataloged, the memories are preserved, but the riddle stands unsolved. A question mark inscribed in the quiet night air over College Town, forever waiting for an answer.